evening. I am so happy to be here once again on this Wednesday evening, and I am happy that you have joined me. So tonight, I am going to be talking about how to know if you are in a failing marriage. So this is going to be a heavy topic. I've been studying a book by Dr. John Gottman. It's right here, and it's the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. So Dr. John Gottman is the relationship guru. So if you don't know, now you know. He is a co-founder of the Gottman Institute, and he's the founder of the Love Lab that's located at the University of Washington in Seattle. So if you're into love or you want to make your love better, going to visit that Love Lab is sure to reveal a lot about you and your spouse and your relationship. So just a few tidbits, right? So Dr. Gottman, he can predict a divorce rate at a 91% accuracy rate. So imagine that he is 91% accurate when he predicts whether or not a marriage will end in divorce. And to top that off, he is able to do that within 15 minutes of observing a couple within the lab. So he did a study, and he's done several studies of different couples, but in this one study, he did a study with 130 couples. And of those 130 couples, he predicted that 15 of those would end in divorce. Well, long story short, or fast forward, and 17 of those couples actually ended in divorce. And that 17 included all 15 of those he had originally predicted. So just marinate on that. I mean, that is just amazing that he's able to do that, right? And so his background is scientific. So he takes out all of the various emotions and things like that that come into play, and he does it scientifically. And he has studied these couples and how they interact with each other for a number of years. And so that is how he's able to predict this divorce at such accuracy. And so tonight, with teaching and studying about the ways that to know how if you're in a failing marriage, is that there are 6 indicators that you are in the failing marriage, right? 6 indicators that we're going to talk about. So the first of the indicators is it's determined by how you start the discussion. You know, when you and your spouse are having a disagreement or argument, how does that discussion start out? The second is based on negative behaviors. So basically there are behaviors that are displayed that can indicate that you are actually in a failing marriage. The third is how much overwhelm is in the marriage. So how much do you feel overwhelmed by the things that are going on, right? So he refers to it as flooding, because it's kind of like you're just getting flooded with all sorts of things coming into the relationship. Fourth is body language. So of course we understand that, because a lot of us have a lot of body language, negative and positive, right? And when it comes into a relationship. So we're going to talk about that. And then there's also failed attempts to fix things in the relationship. So that's another indicator, is that if you've tried and you've been trying things to fix your relationship, then that is an indicator that your marriage is in trouble. And the final indicator is about if you are consumed by negativity and bad memories, meaning that everything about your relationship, all you can think of it was negative from the start, and then you only have bad memories about that. So then we will wrap up with 4 final stages that indicate the end of the relationship. Okay? So now let me introduce myself. I am Laquita Joseph of Copper Penny Coaching. I am a relationship coach. And so I help couples turn their failing marriages into flourishing and loving relationships, full of appreciation, passion, and understanding. I help them to reboot and to reconnect so that they can get back the friendship and the fun that they once had in their marriage. So that is what I'm about, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So before we jump into this content, because it's going to be really heavy, it's more serious than last week, right? But I do want to know who's out there, so you can drop it in the comments box and just say where you're from, and then also if you could just share what made you decide to join this live tonight. And I want to see it because I want to call it out and I want to share with others that are on. So just please just put it in the comment box. Why did you decide to join the live tonight? So I joined it because I want to help couples save their marriage. So that's why I'm here. And so you can find me here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. because I will have various topics for you to dig into. So just share with me while you're here. And I'll give you a couple of seconds and then we're going to move on. Okay? All right, so then let's go ahead, let's jump into this content, right? So the first indicator that you are in a failing marriage is about how you start discussions with your spouse. So when you are in a heated conversation or you want to have a serious conversation, maybe you're upset with them about something, right? Typically that's when we typically talk is when we're upset and we want to talk about it. But it's how you start that conversation that's an indicator of whether or not you are in this failing marriage. So if you start out and you're negative, it's sarcastic, or you're accusing or blaming the other person. So instead of just talking and sharing with them, I don't like these things. So instead of using I statements, we're starting out with saying you do this or you don't do that. That is starting the conversation off wrong, okay? So if you do start off that way, what you need to do is once you realize it, and it happens, right? It's not like this is anything new, but it happens. But once you realize it and you take a breath, just stop, pause, take a breath, and start over again. And say, you know what? Let me rephrase that. Let me start differently. Because you want to get a different response from your spouse, okay? The second indicator that you're in a failing marriage is based on behaviors. And so Dr. John Gottman talks about these behaviors and he calls them the 4 horsemen. And so these 4 horsemen kind of get together and they team up on you in your marriage. Basically, they're beating up you in your marriage. The 4 horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So we're going to start with criticism. So criticism is not the same thing as complaining, right? So, all of us complain, and that's usual, that's normal. And it's okay that you complain because, sometimes you don't like everything and everything isn't, the way that you want it to be. So you may have some complaints about, things in the relationship or how things are being handled, how things are being managed. But it's different if it becomes more of a personal attack against the other person. It becomes personal, it's an attack against their character or any of those things. That is when it crosses the line and it's not just complaining, but you're being critical of the other person. And so it is actually very common in relationships because that's just how we are, human nature, we do those things. And so, that's just where it is. But the second horseman is contempt. Now contempt, he is really bad. So this contempt is where one of the spouses feel like they are better than the other one. you know, they are super superior to you, that they do everything right, the way that you do everything is wrong, and that maybe you're just stupid, you don't know any better, things like that. They are hostile, they maybe roll their eyes at you or something like that. That is being contemptuous, and that just leads to more and more conflict, right? Because the other person, right, is not just going to sit there and let you just call them these things or insinuate things about them and their character. So it's fueled basically by just having a long period of time where you think negative thoughts about your spouse. So this happens because, you know, inside your head, you know, we all are inside of our head, inside of our minds, and we're thinking different things. And so in this case, you're thinking bad, negative things over a period of time about your spouse. And so it just creates this contempt within you, and almost like you're just disgusted with them. And there is a close relative of contempt, and Dr. Gottman says that it's the cousin of contempt, and that's being belligerent. And so being belligerent, where you are basically, you know, being very aggressive and attacking the other person, and you're basically provoking them. So you're challenging them, almost daring them to even say something back to you, or even try to defend themselves in any type of way. So in this case, it's like, you know, a spouse may respond to a comment. Maybe the wife has said, you know, she's upset because he doesn't come home in time for dinner after work. And so, but he responds in such a way to say, so what? You know, what are you going to do about it? You know, so that's being belligerent, because now you're really pushing that person. They're just expressing one thing to you, that, you know, this is what's bothering them, and then you fire back at them with something that kind of like, you know, you're almost pushing them in a corner, and in a way that maybe they need to defend themselves. So speaking of defend themselves, that third horseman is defensiveness. And so, you know, so the logical thing to happen, right, after someone has been critical of you, or they have been contemptuous towards you or belligerent towards you, is that you want to defend yourself. So that, you know, and that's a natural response. You know, we all do that. And we're going to do that if we feel backed against the wall, that we're going to defend ourselves. The problem is, it doesn't work, and it doesn't help the situation. Because when you start to defend yourself, that other person don't even care. They're not trying to hear what you have to say. Then they just continue to attack you. And now it just keeps going back and forth, because now it becomes a bigger argument than it started out as, because now they're like, whatever, and now they're going in, and, you know, they're going in for blood at this point, for defensiveness. So, you know, and so when these three horsemen get together, they can just really wear down the relationship. You know, they get to going, and so you have criticism going on, you have contempt going on, then defensiveness, and, you know, it just keeps getting batted back and forth and back and forth. Eventually, it wears the relationship down. And when that happens, that fourth horseman shows up. And that fourth horseman is stonewalling. And basically, when someone stonewalls, they have basically gotten to a point where they have shut down, basically. They shut down, they will not respond to anything that the other spouse is saying. You know, they're regretting it, so they are anticipating that this is going to be bad and it's going to blow up. And so they may think that they're doing a favor or defueling things, right, by simply not saying anything, but that is not the case. It just fuels the fire, because, you know, you have one spouse on one side who feels like you're just ignoring them, you don't care or anything like that, because you're stonewalling. But your position is that, you know, you either, one, try to diffuse it, or two, you just feel like you're tired of it, and you just like, I don't want to say anything because it's just going to get worse. So in a normal conversation, you know, if you were working with a normal relationship, and there's a conversation going on. Typically, what you find is the couples are listening to each other, and they know that they're listening because you're either giving eye contact or you're giving some verbal sounds to say yes or yeah or uh-huh, and lets the other person know that you are paying attention and that you're interested in hearing what they have to say. But in the stonewalling situation, that person is not listening. They're not giving the eye contact. They won't give a verbal word or anything. They have really just totally shut down and disengaged. So those were the 4 horsemen under the second indicator. The third indicator is flooding. And this is a term by Dr. Gottman called flooding, but it's really being overwhelmed in the relationship. So after you've gone through all these things and you've been beat up by these 4 horsemen, and now you're just in a state of overwhelm in your relationship. You just don't know what else to do, and you're kind of giving up. You're worn out by all these behaviors, and it's just like, you're just disengaged from the relationship. So leads to the 4th indicator, which is your body language. So at this point, you have this body language. And typically we think about the body language in terms of, whether we're rolling our eyes and things like that, folding our arms and things like that, or, maybe, if we're standing, we may stomp off, and so that someone's angry with you because of that. But the part of body language that Dr. Gottman talks about is where you physically, your heart rate physically goes up, your blood pressure physically goes up, and your adrenaline kicks in. And so once that adrenaline kicks in, you're in a fight or flight mode, right? Fight or flight. You're going to do something, but you have to at this point. And so that is what is meant by body language. When your relationship has become so toxic that you start to feel it in your body itself, and it starts to physically affect you. And so when that happens over and over and over and over again, that results in divorce. Because who wants to be in a relationship where they're going to be unhealthy and they're going to be unhappy all of the time? So what I'm saying, I want to note that the things that I've said so far does not mean that every man and every woman will react and respond this way, but typically what Dr. Gottman has found is that it does in the lab and what he's experienced, okay? So you have all this overwhelm going on in your relationship, and when that comes into play, what's the next thing to happen? You have emotional distancing. So you've started to distance yourself from each other or from your spouse. One or both may distance themselves from each other. You start to feel lonely, and then it leads to divorce. So something that's really interesting about all this is that even in good marriages, right? You might think that the marriage is good. You see indicators, or you believe there are indicators that the marriage is okay, right? So maybe you don't see the signs of the 4 horsemen in this relationship, but maybe one of the people in the relationship has basically kind of checked out, but they kind of go through the motions of everything else within the family. And so they're still going to, doing the kids' activities and attending all of these activities and being present for that. They may still be hosting like dinner parties as a couple at the house and inviting friends and family over. They also may even be taking family vacations together. So sometimes you don't even really know that there's really something going on within a marriage. Only that couple knows, because they know how they're really interacting with each other, whether they are connecting with each other. And it's really what it's all about, is being able to connect with each other instead of going through the motions. And so in this case, they are able to do that, but they are emotionally disconnected from their spouse and from each other. They don't really care. All they're there for is to kind of do the things that seem to be the right things to do in a relationship. So the 5th indicator of a failing marriage is failed attempts at fixing things. So this means like you have tried to fix this relationship, you have done things, the two of you, maybe one of you, and you've tried over and over again to resolve the problems, but you keep failing. You just can't get beyond it. It just will not work. You cannot make it work. And so that is another indicator, because at this point, you're not able to de-escalate any of the arguments, right? You're not de-escalating anything. You have the four horsemen who live in your house, live in your relationship, and they're causing chaos because they're always there. So there's always some criticism, some contempt, some defensiveness and stonewalling at various times and stages going on in the relationship. So it's really hard for you to be connected and to feel any other way. And it's really hard to solve any problems when you're not listening to each other. And that's what's happening with the four horsemen, is that you're not able to even listen to each other for all of the arguing and bickering and blaming and all of that stuff that's going on. So the other indicator, the sixth indicator, is if you are consumed by negativity and bad memories in the relationship. So basically, everything about your relationship, what you remember, is something negative. You know, you can't look at the wedding album without thinking, you know, oh, she was flirting with the groomsmen at the wedding, or something negative every single time, or everything that you ever did together was like a joke to you. It didn't matter, and it was just a bad time in your life, and that's what you believe, right? And so that is the sixth indicator. So you have a negative view of your spouse, you have a negative view of the marriage. And so you've just rewritten all the stories in the past, and they are now all bad. They're negative as well. So those were the six indicators. And so with all of that going on in a relationship, there's no wonder that it would fail and end up in divorce. You know, Dr. Gottman says that, you know, couples are likely to divorce after 16 years, and that's when you don't have the four horsemen involved in the relationship. So if you're going through the motions, so say for instance that scenario where the couple is just going through the motions, but one probably is disengaged from the relationship, you're not really connected, but you guys are still going through activities with each other, with the kids and vacations and all of those things. In that scenario, of those type of scenarios, after 16 years, they will end in divorce. But if the four horsemen are involved in the relationship, that 16-year frame is decreased down to 5.6 years. So within 5.6 years, they will divorce. That is just amazing, just outrageous actually, to just know that that is the case. So which brings me back to why I'm here tonight, because what I want to do is I want to save marriages. I am passionate about that. I am sincere about that. I believe that your marriage can work, and you can make it work if you want to. So the four final stages, the four final things that indicate that, okay, now this relationship is at the end, is one, if you as a couple see that your marital problems are severe, then that is an indicator that it's almost over. Because by the time you determine or you decide that it's bad, you probably let it go too long. So if you see and you believe that your marital problems are severe, then you're probably at the end. The second thing is that when you start to feel like talking things over is useless, like there's no need in talking about it anymore, that you've already been there, you've talked enough, and that you're just done. No need in talking about it. You can solve your problems on your own, but at this point, you know, there's nothing for you to just say to each other. The third item is if the couple is leading different lives. So you're leading parallel lives. That's the third indicator of the final stage before you're just ready for divorce. Is that you're leading different lives. You're doing one thing, she's doing another thing, he's doing one thing, and he's going and taking care and having a life outside of the marriage, outside of the home, and it's separate and different than what's inside of the home. Then that is a surefire stage, that indicator that you're in the final stages. And the fourth one is when loneliness sets in. So once the couples or individuals start to feel lonely because now you're not communicating, you're not connected within the relationship, of course that probably means you're not having sex with each other, you're starved of that and having that union with each other. Or you're not having it as often, because still, you know, if you're going through the motions, you might go through the motions just to kind of satisfy yourself for a moment, but then it's really still no connection between the two of you when you're coming together in that way. So that loneliness sets in. And so once loneliness and all of those things set in, then either one or both of the spouses will inevitably have an affair. So that's kind of the story. You know, we hear about the affair and we know that infidelity is real and that it's not fair and that I'm not condoning that at all. But from what Dr. Gottman has indicated, that it is not the cause. So the affair is not the cause of the problems in the marriage. It's the symptom. So you're just seeing the symptoms, but the cause were all of those things that were indicators that we've gone through already. And so now we have a symptom of something that now we have to try to find a cure for, and a way that we can get through it if we want to save our marriage, right? So most of the time, couples don't get help until it is too late. We miss the signs. We don't pay attention to what's really going on in the relationship. And so we miss those signs. And unfortunately, some of them, you know, are more hasty to just get the divorce and let it be over with, rather than put in additional work. Try to put in additional work, which is difficult because you feel like you've already worked so hard to try to make it work, but it failed. So now you just feel like you have no recourse other than to get a divorce. So I believe, though, that marriages can be saved. I don't care what has happened in that relationship, how bad it has been, but if you love each other, and that's key, if you still love each other and both of you want to make this marriage work, it can work. I believe that 100%. 100%. So anyone out there believes that? Anyone else? Drop it in the comment box and say, say I believe, if you believe that it can work if you want to make it work. The interesting thing that I find too is, with marriage, right? A lot of times people are quick to divorce in a marriage, right? From a marriage where there's been infidelity. But you could have relationships and other people that you would tolerate that from, and you would give them a chance over and over and over again. And this person that you supposedly love, and I know it's hard to feel like they love you back if they have cheated on you, right? I get it. I know. I get that. But you have vowed that you really do love that person. And if they really love you too, then the two of you can work together and you can work it out. You can work together. It takes hard work. It's painful. I'll say it's painful. It's difficult to do, but it can be done. So I say all that to say, if you're interested and you feel like your relationship could use this help, some additional help, third-party help to help you get to where you want to be in your relationship, then you can reach out to me, right? So you can visit my website. It's www.copperpennycoaching.com/contact. And if you go to that contact page, at the bottom of the screen, you will find a button that says free strategy session. And you can set up and schedule a 30-minute session with me so we can just talk about where you are and what you're looking for. It's a free session. So go to www.copperpennycoaching.com/contact and set up that free session so that we can talk about what your needs are. Okay? I thank you so much for joining. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion tonight. I know it was a little bit heavier. It's not something that we love to talk about. We don't want to talk about our failing marriages and our failing relationships, but sometimes that's where we go wrong, is that, you know, we're embarrassed and afraid to talk about it. But if we talk about it, or we seek the right help, right? Everybody doesn't have to be in your business, but you seek the right help, and you can resolve issues, you can work through the problems, and you can save your marriage. Have a good night. Thank you. Bye.